Welcome back to the deep dive. Get ready because today we are plunging headfirst into some truly raw and pretty challenging source material.
We really are.
We're looking at excerpts from Something Wicked. It's a first-person narrative that just pulls you right into the unfiltered world of a teenager
Yeah.
as she's grappling with circumstances that are, well, frankly, incredibly tough.
Absolutely. And our mission here, it's, more than just reading the story. We want to understand her perspective, her core perspective,
Yeah.
and identify the deep struggles she's navigating and really explore how she uses tools like,
Mythology.
yes, mythology to try and make sense of her chaotic reality.
It's fascinating how she does that.
We're going to be digging out the most important nuggets, those surprising insights, and the moments that really, stick with you from her story.
Okay, let's unpack this. Right from the jump, the narrator's voice, it just grabs you.
Mm-hmm.
It's challenging, it's sharp, but she's quick to tell you she's not school smart, people smart.
Yeah, that line stands out.
And there's a bluntness, an immediate pushback. Like when she reads her file, sees sexually promiscuous, and bang, immediately confronts her counselor, Eric.
With that line, right.
Yeah, so you're saying I'm a slut.
Wow. That line is designed to shock, isn't it? It really sets the stage immediately for that dynamic with Eric.
It really does.
She approaches him with suspicion, almost like she's daring him, Yet he meets it with this kind of remarkable patience.
Which must be hard for her to deal with.
Right. She describes his approach as waiting like a predator in the grass for a moment of vulnerability.
Oof.
Which tells you everything about her distrust of adults, right? But what's fascinating is how he uses that waiting. It's not to attack, but maybe to find an opening for connection.
And central to the persona she builds, this whole defense, is this concept of echo.
Ah, yes, Echo.
She uses it as a name for herself when she's talking to you. We know Echo from mythology cursed by Hera.
Cursed to only repeat what others say after trying to help Zeus out. And what this reliance on mythology reveals, which I think is really insightful, is she's not just referencing Echo, she's almost becoming Echo.
Like a shield.
Exactly, as a shield. She deliberately adopts this name, this identity, partly to remind herself, don't give away too much to adults.
Just repeat what they say.
Yeah, say what they want to hear. That line, think what you want of me, you'll never get inside. It's so powerful.
It is.
And it's coupled with her actively mimicking their tone, too. It shows this isn't just about the words. It's like she's trying to transform her trauma into some kind of, distorted superpower for self-protection.
But does it really work? I mean, you see these moments where the persona it cracks.
Mm-hmm. It does.
Despite trying so hard to be this impenetrable Echo, her real feelings, her hurt, her vulnerability, they still surface.
Sometimes unexpectedly.
Yeah, often in her internal thoughts, right? That tension between the deliberate shield she puts up and the exposed reality underneath, that's one of the most striking things about this narrative.
Exactly. The myth gives her a framework, maybe, but the human reality keeps breaking through. It has to.
Okay, so now that we've seen the intricate psychological defenses she's building, let's look at the complex, often painful reality she's using those defenses against.
Right.
Starting with her family dynamics.
Right.
Which are incredibly complex and just full of contradictions, especially with her mother.
The mother figure, yeah. She's presented with this really disorienting blend of actions, things that could be interpreted so differently.
Like giving her early independence, is that trust? Or is it, irresponsibility?
Hard to tell. And taking her for birth control at 14, that shows a kind of pragmatic concern, right?
It does.
But then it exists alongside her struggling to hold down a job or constantly relying on men. It's confusing.
That chaos is just laid bare in that scene around the school drug bust.
Oh, yeah.
Her mother's reaction, it just pivots wildly from trying to charm their way out of it with the school official.
Even making light of experimenting with weed herself.
Right. To then turning on the narrator in the car screaming, shut up, shut up, shut up.
And then later it's just this cold advice like, don't be an idiot about it, and leaves you reeling. Like, what is her mother's priority here?
Exactly.
And her mother's relationships with men, they're filtered through the narrator's eyes with this really bleak transactional lens.
Yeah, the idea of sex as a barter.
It's not just mentioned, it's a concept that clearly saturates the narrator's understanding of relationships and herself from a really young age.
Then there's the shocking revelation of the mother's pregnancy.
Mm-hmm.
The narrator's reaction isn't supportive at all. It's immediate, raw anger and avoidance. She even labels her mother weak,
Which adds another layer of like perceived burden and disappointment onto the narrator, though we do see a small shift later, right, when the mother gets that job.
Yeah, assistant to a tax guy. A little bit of stability, maybe?
Maybe. But perhaps the most visceral moment comes from that raw physical conflict described.
The bad incident.
Yeah. The mother hitting her with a bat while the narrator was actually defending her from another man. The sheer shock in the narrator's reaction, "You fucking hit me."
It just highlights the volatile, unpredictable, and frankly violent environment she exists within. That scene alone, it speaks volumes about the level of duress.
And layered over all of this is the lingering impact of her younger brother, Bradley's death.
Right, we learn they ended up in a shelter afterward.
And the mother's reaction to his death, the description of her squatted on the floor in the corner, her head buried in her knees.
It's described as a source of terror for the narrator. Maybe even more terrifying in that moment than the death itself. Her mother just completely collapsing felt like the immediate threat.
That makes sense. And what's truly insightful is a later conversation. She manages to verbalize this really complex, almost taboo feeling.
Anger towards Bradley.
Yeah, anger towards Bradley for dying, for messing up the family unit even further.
And the surprising part isn't just her admitting this. It's the mother's response.
Exactly. Not judgment, but this gentle, surprised, and empathetic, it's not dumb.
It's such a rare, fragile moment of connection
Yeah,
and shared pain in a narrative that's often just devoid of it.
it really stands out.
The father, meanwhile, is almost a non-entity in the source material.
Just mentioned in passing.
Yeah, reinforcing that sense of abandonment, that lack of a stable male figure in her life.
And then there's Giovanni, the building superintendent, her mother's long-term partner.
Right. The narrator initially finds him repellent, avoids him.
But then there's that deeply unsettling incident where she goes to his office seeming high and just offers him sex.
So you want to do it?
His reaction in the text is surprise, right? And he refuses after realizing her age.
You're 16.
Yeah. And his explanation for helping them, not because of what happened, but because of what happened, it's deliberately ambiguous in the source.
It is. It hints at some complex motivation beyond that specific encounter. Maybe acknowledging the difficult circumstances without directly, addressing her interpretation.
And her immediate command to him, forget it and don't tell anyone, that just underscores the weight and the secrecy surrounding this whole interaction.
Given this chaotic and contradictory home environment, it's maybe not surprising that her external relationships become another battleground.
Especially explored through her sense of self-worth or lack thereof.
Michael is the central figure here, despite the significant age gap. He's 28, she's 16.
Yeah, that's a big gap.
Their relationship is secret, marked by his apparent shame about the age difference, as she describes it. But she finds this surprising depth of connection with him.
Even though she describes him initially almost dismissively, almost boring, with a little dribble of depression and an ex-girlfriend.
Right, but what she finds with him is described as a different language of love.
One based on words and expression, which is such a contrast to the conflict and the transactionality she's used to.
Being with him made her feel light again. It offered a brief respite, a sense of comfort, maybe feeling normal for a bit.
Which makes the breakup so devastating for her.
Totally. It's left unfinished. She obsesses, questions what she did wrong, even recognizes signs of depression in him that she couldn't fix.
The obsession that follows is really intense. She sees him as this heavy, solid mass that just blocks out everything else.
And her desperate attempt to contact him through his mother breaking into the clinic where she worked to get the number.
Wow. That's extreme. It's a stark illustration of this obsession.
And the phone call is brief, right? Ends abruptly. His mother hangs up after the narrator presses for details.
Yeah. Ultimately, she describes making a decision to let go, but she frames it as giving in to destiny rather than actively fighting it.
And that symbolic act described writing and burning the letter to him on the roof.
It feels like this desperate, almost ritualistic attempt at closure for something that was just left completely unresolved.
The source also touches on other relationships, Jeremy, Sid, Fortune, Nathan.
Right. These show different facets of her navigating intimacy and seeking validation in pretty unhealthy ways.
Flirting, transactional sex often linked to getting drugs or alcohol.
And the incident with Fortune and the cat is particularly telling, I think.
It really is. She shows compassion for this cat that Fortune is abusing. It's such a stark contrast to his callousness. And it leads her to actually take the cat in.
It highlights this capacity for empathy that's often hidden beneath her, her tough exterior.
Definitely. And this brings us to a really pivotal concept. It's introduced in the hospital through a conversation with another patient, the crazy lady.
Ah, yes. The woman talks about the body being sacred,
And that giving it away makes it worthless.
and the narrator has this incredible, like, jarring moment of realization.
Yes, that is exactly how I feel. Worthless.
She immediately connects this overwhelming feeling to her experiences, stating, "Every fucking one of them has stripped my soul."
Oof, that line hits hard.
This moment isn't just sad, it's a critical hinge point, I think. After all her defiance, after presenting herself as someone detached, this admission of worthlessness.
It cracks open why she might have been using sex as a barter.
Exactly, and it reveals the profound internal cost she's been paying all along. It completely reframes her earlier, seemingly detached perspective that sex doesn't make a difference.
It does make a
It
difference.
does. It's been eroding her sense of self. Deeply.
That realization, that feeling of worthlessness, it leads us directly into the crisis points described in the source, and the potential, maybe tentative paths forward.
The drug use is just a constant shadow, isn't it?
Constantly there. Starting with smoking weed, it escalates. She experiments with a whole range of substances: coke, E, concertus, K, meth, morphine, acid.
And she specifically tries meth once. The description is so stark, like suicide a second time.
Yeah, that says everything.
Oh.
She's also using codeine pills from her job just to cope, just to sleep.
And this substance use has real-world consequences, like getting caught with weed at school, leading to her 5th suspension.
Piff, wow.
There's also a debt owed to her uncle, Freestyle, related to lost weed, adding another layer of pressure.
And it all sort of culminates in the break and enter at work.
Right. Her motive seems deeply personal, tied to that obsession with Michael. Stealing his file just to get his mother's number.
Getting caught leads to her being fired, feeling immediately typecast as a punk.
And we also learn her coworker, Rachel, reported her, and the narrator retaliates by smashing Rachel's windshield. It's just this destructive cycle.
All these pressures, this internal turmoil, it seems to contribute directly to the overdose and the hospitalization in the ASU, the Adolescent Services Unit.
She describes the emptiness she felt driving her to party and get high, just searching for something, anything to fill the void.
Her descriptions of the hospital environment itself are quite telling, too.
Yeah, the strict rules, the lack of privacy, observing other patients like the woman who couldn't feed herself, her interactions with staff members like Warren the CYC or Alexis the guard.
It paints this picture of a sterile, controlled space that basically forces her to slow down and confront her situation, stripped of her usual defenses.
And it's in this environment that options for her future are laid out.
There's the group home referral, involving her probation officer and a CAS worker.
Her initial reaction is visceral resistance, right? Seeing it as committing yourself to jail.
But later, the source indicates she starts to consider it, recognizing maybe it can only get worse if she doesn't change something fundamental.
There's also the possibility of returning home, but with conditions, discussed with her mother and the social worker.
And the social worker's phrasing here is so powerful. You are the quarterback.
Yeah, placing the responsibility for navigating this incredibly complex situation squarely on her shoulders, which is a lot for a teenager.
It's a huge weight.
Yeah.
And even amidst these difficult choices, there are these glimpses of potential for change. Shifts in her perspective that feel earned, not just stated.
Like working at the vet clinic before she was fired, that was a place where she felt normal, where she was just Melissa.
Free from the performance, right? Free from the echo persona or the weight of her troubles for a bit.
And that realization that she is part of the problem, that her actions have consequences for others, that's a significant step towards accountability, towards introspection.
And as we discussed, that conversation about her body being sacred and the impact of feeling worthless seems to unlock a deeper understanding of herself, maybe for the first time.
Her reflections on mythology also evolve, don't they?
They do. She initially interprets the Lady of Shalott myth in a fairly standard way, falling in love with someone unattainable, like Michael.
But later she connects it to that small moment of regret as the true tragedy of the story.
It's a shift, isn't it? From focusing on the object of desire, Michael, to the internal cost of her own actions, her own choices.
Her connection to the Sisyphus myth feels really profound, seeing herself doomed to repeat tasks endlessly.
Linking it explicitly to her lack of respect for authority.
It's such a powerful metaphor for her feeling trapped in this cycle of struggle, and it contrasts sharply with her uncle's more action-oriented lion or gazelle saying.
Right. Sisyphus is about unavoidable fate, this endless task, which seems to resonate more with her feelings of being stuck.
A significant turning point is described as the decision to give in rather than give up.
Which sounds similar but feels different.
Exactly. It's not surrendering to defeat necessarily, but maybe stopping the relentless resistance. Resistance to her circumstances, to the help being offered.
She notes near the end, the fight is gone.
Yeah. Which suggests this profound internal shift, a weariness for sure, but also maybe a potential openness.
The source also mentions the possibility discussed with Eric about finally processing her anger towards Bradley's death.
Suggesting a path towards maybe healing some of that deep family trauma, which would be huge.
And a moment of calm seems to be found in her interaction with Mrs. Daly at the alternative school.
Right. The detail about the desks designed to evoke childhood, Mrs. Daly's quiet, calm demeanor. It offers such a stark contrast to the chaos she's used to.
And it's in that space, that quieter environment, that she identifies something she actually wants.
Wanting to be a veterinarian.
Yeah. It's a glimpse of a future built around care, around a different kind of connection. Not transaction, not defense.
Ultimately, her perspective on how teenagers see the world versus adults is really insightful, I think.
Teenagers, she feels, see the messy gray, all the nuance, while adults see things in black and white.
And she concludes that seeing that murky gray is just too stressful, too confusing.
So in a final act of coping, really, she decides to actively let that window of perception close up.
Putting people back into clear, simpler categories as a way to just function.
Wow. This deep dive has taken us through the incredibly raw, honest experiences of this teenager. Her fight for identity, the confusing and painful family dynamics, her navigation of love and significant trauma.
And the search for ways to cope and understand it all.
And we've seen how she doesn't just, sprinkle myths into her story. She uses them as these potent frameworks to understand her reality.
Yeah. Echo as a shield for survival. Sisyphus as a metaphor for her perceived inescapable struggle. Lady of Shalott evolving from unattainable love to the tragedy of missed connection and regret.
And this connects back to you, the listener, by powerfully illustrating how complex navigating adolescence can be, especially under duress.
It really showcases the universal human search for identity, the varied, often painful coping mechanisms people employ, and the messy, non-linear process of coming to terms with yourself and the world around you.
It's a visceral reminder, isn't it, that people's internal lives, their pain, their struggles, can be hidden beneath the surface of their behavior, sometimes masked by defiance, sometimes by silence.
Absolutely. And as our narrator, having glimpsed the messy, murky gray of human complexity, decides to close that window of perception and retreat into simpler categories, well, that leaves us with a question, drawn directly from her experience.
Is avoiding the complex truth sometimes necessary just to function in a difficult world?
Or does shutting that window ultimately prevent genuine understanding and connection, both with others and perhaps most importantly with ourselves? Something to think about.